Right, let's dive straight into this explainer. Today, we're going to decode a deeply metaphorical poem called Musings Belonging to Development. Now, development is a word we toss around all the time, right? We talk about personal development, global development, economic growth, but what does that process actually feel like from the inside? In this explainer, we're going to look closely at this work to really understand the true and honestly often very challenging nature of change.
Listen to how her opening lines set this incredibly rhythmic, serious tone right off the bat. Right out of the gate, she defines development not as some magical quick fix or, an overnight success story. It's a relentless, steady walk. By calling it a progressive path and then immediately following that up with a rough road, she's really grounding our expectations here. Progress is a journey, and she wants us to know for sure that the terrain isn't going to be smooth.
Section 1. Who is Oluyomi Oladavid? Before we go any deeper into the metaphors of this journey, let's establish exactly whose long walk we're tracing and the unique perspective she brings to the table.
We're unpacking her insights today, and to truly grasp the weight of her musings, we've absolutely got to center her Nigerian identity and her unique voice as we explore her worldview. Her background is literally the lens through which this entire poem is focused. She brings this totally fascinating mix of practical policy influence and deep spiritual conviction to her work. She describes herself as someone deeply concerned about global development and transformation. Well, actually, scratch that. Not just concerned. She's actively generating solutions and influencing strategy. But equally important to her professional drive is her personal faith. She notes that she views her Father God as the ultimate ruler of the universe, and she beautifully describes him as the wheel within her wheels that drives her forward. It's this exact intersection of global policy and personal spiritual grounding that makes her poetry so incredibly rich.
Moving right along to Section 2, The Rough Road. Let's see how this builds into her vivid descriptions of the harsh realities of the developmental journey.
Notice how she uses that rhythmic repetition of the phrase, "it is." She repeats it over and over to emphasize the literal and metaphorical struggles we face. She talks about a hungry belly and a thirsty throat, leading right into these powerful images of a boisterous boat and the stormy wind. She's making us feel the instability of change. When you're trying to develop, whether you're a nation trying to build an economy or an individual just trying to better your life, it often feels like you're being tossed around on a wavy stream.
And this slide hits the nail on the head regarding the core contrast of her poem. On one side, we see the intense external struggles she lists out, the stormy wind, the bed of thorns, the swampy grass, but juxtaposed directly against those elements is the internal fortitude she says is required to survive them. To navigate those thorns and storms, she insists you've got to cultivate a humble mind, a focused gaze, and a fruitful hand. The environment is completely chaotic, but her message is that your internal state has to remain disciplined and productive.
All right, Section 3, The Senses of Development. The really crucial point here is how she translates these abstract concepts of growth into highly physical, tangible actions. She lists these sensory actions as strict prerequisites for change. Step 1, a clear nose. Step 2, sharp sight. Step 3, an open ear. What she's implying here is that true development requires a hyper level of physical awareness. You can't be asleep at the wheel. You need an intense hunger to understand the world around you, to see the reality of your situation sharply, and to listen openly to what your environment is telling you. Development isn't just something that passively happens to you, it's something you've got to actively perceive.
When she writes in the poem about a daily clock and an hourly step, she really grounds her abstract poetry in reality. It shows us that progress is a literal, incremental climb. She's telling us that development is built block by block, hour by hour. It's not some giant leap. It's the exhausting, everyday commitment to making that hourly step, even when the road is rough.
Next up, Section 4, A Patient Shepherd. Moving into the later stanzas of the poem, she shifts our focus. We move away from the harsh, stormy elements and look toward the necessary guidance required for the long haul.
She emphasizes here that you don't have to walk this rough road entirely alone, or even perfectly for that matter. She writes about a silent whisper and a patient shepherd, pointing toward a guiding force, which connects right back to her reliance on her faith. But what's truly striking to me is her inclusion of that second chance and a necessary turn. She's reassuring us that making a mistake, needing a second chance, or having to pivot and make a turn aren't signs of failure. No way. Rather, they're essential, built-in course corrections on this, as she calls it, uncommon route.
Which brings us to Section 5, The Surgery of Love.
Finally, we reach the culmination of her musings. After all the storms, the thorns, and the hourly steps, what is the emotional and spiritual fuel that actually sustains this journey?
She beautifully frames faith, hope, and love as medical interventions. Think about that phrasing for a second. A dose of faith, a capsule of hope, and the surgery of love. Surgery is invasive, right? It cuts to heal. She's suggesting that true development, true transformation of both individuals and global societies requires ultimate medicinal interventions. It requires us to endure the painful but literally life-saving surgery of love to truly become what we're meant to be.
Her concluding lines wrap up this narrative arc flawlessly. After detailing the pain, the patience, and the necessary sensory awareness, she reminds us that transformation is ultimately a massive, exhausting, but totally necessary learning curve. Taking a deep breath before continuing that long walk is just the perfect summary of the stamina required for development.
To end this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought directly inspired by her words. We've seen how she breaks down development from a hazy buzzword into a gritty, sensory, and deeply spiritual climb. So the question remains, when you look at your own goals or the goals of your community, are you truly prepared for the storms, the necessary turns, and the exhausting learning curve that leads you there? Take a deep breath and think about your next hourly step.